All right, so the budget as a control tool, okay? So that's what this whole class is all about, is controlling our food and beverage cost, okay? Because if we can control that cost, and we can control those expenses, the ones that we have control over, then that will hopefully lead to an increase in profit. It will be more successful, okay? So we can use the budget as a control tool because the budget is a plan. The budget is a plan of what we are going towards. So if my goal is to make $50,000 in sales during the month of September, and I look at September 15th, and we're only at $30,000 in sales, I know that I need to start picking something up, right? Although the month is half over and I'm over half my goal, so maybe I might think I'm in a good place. Or maybe I might see that at the end of September we have a conference of 20,000 people coming into San Antonio. So I may not be terribly worried about am I going to reach my sales goal for $50,000 for the month, right? And so our budget allows us to figure out where we're going. How many of you have ever heard your manager say, I don't have any more labor budget. I'm out of labor dollars, right? It's like, why can't we bring 2 more people in? I can't afford it. I've already spent my labor budget for the month, okay? So just like we have a budget for sales, we also have a budget for our expenses. Whether it's a restaurant or a hotel, if you're in a hotel, we look at, when we're setting the budgets for the year, we look at the occupancy percentage. We look at what we're going to charge for each room. And so that tells us what our sales are going to be, what our volume is going to be. And if I'm only going to have 50% occupancy, do I need to have a full staff in my hotel? No. So my budget for labor has to reflect what the percentage is in the hotel. Same thing in the restaurants. If I'm not going to be crazy busy, then I don't want to have a fully staffed restaurant. Okay, I need to start sending people home. I might start out that way. I might start with the full staff, and then at certain points of the dinner service or the lunch service, if I'm not as busy as I thought I was going to be, I'm gonna look at my budget and say, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna reach my sales goal, so I need to also lower my expenses and my costs budget. And so we want to make sure that we're constantly looking at that. All right, so we want to assess the results. So our budget, again, is our plan where we're going. And then we also want to look at the differences of what actually happens. What's another fancy way of saying difference? Okay, so subtraction, not variable, but it's close. Variance, okay? So in the business world, you might hear the word variance. What is my variance? That's just a fancy way of saying difference, okay? The difference in the actual versus the what you budgeted, what you planned for, okay? So let's say our budget is $50,000, okay?
And we're figuring out the variance, right?
Yep. So we're figuring out our variance. So we budgeted for $50,000. Okay? At the end of the month, my actual sales were $45,000. Okay? $45,000. Did I meet my budget? No. But oftentimes it's easiest to look at things as a percentage. Okay, rather than just looking at a dollar amount, it's easier to interpret it as a percentage. Okay, so when we look at our variance is what? What is the formula for variance? Good. So our variance equals our actual minus the budgeted, and we have to do it in this way. Okay. So our actual in this case is 45,000. Our budgeted is 50,000. So what is my answer? Negative 5,000. okay? Negative 5,000. So when I want to figure out what my variance is, okay, I take my 5,000, I divide that by my original budgeted amount of 50,000, and I get a negative 10%. That means I was short by my budget by 10%. Okay, so that is my variance. Is it always a bad thing to be negative? Who can give me an example of a time when it's okay to have a negative variance?
You've actually made more money than what you expected to make.
Okay, so yes, when you've made more money, you would have a positive variance because you made more money than you budgeted for. Okay, to have a negative variance, let's say our cost. That means we did not spend as much money on our costs as we budgeted for. So it would be okay to have a negative variance in that case. Is it always good to have a positive variance?
If it's above 33%, you said.
So our food cost that we're shooting for is 33%, yes, but in this case we're talking about the difference in our actual versus our budgeted, what we planned. So when would be an example of?
So if you had a positive, it'd be bad, right?
In what way?
Because your actual would be that you overspend what you budgeted.
So when it comes to our costs and our expenses, if we have a positive variance, that means we spent more money than we budgeted, we planned for, and that would not be necessarily a good thing. Okay? And now a lot of this has to do with understanding how to interpret the data and how to look at the data. So if my sales are super high, then reason says that my costs also have to be a little bit higher. So if I went over budget on if I went over variance on my sales, then it's okay to have a little bit over on my expenses. That means I just spend more money on food to make the food to serve it, right? But if I didn't meet my sales and I was over on expenses, that's not a good combination, okay? So it's not just black and white, clear cut, okay, this is the way it is. If this is positive, it's good. If this is negative, it's bad. You can't just look at it that way. You have to be able to interpret the information, okay? And that takes practice, that takes time. So the last step is taking corrective action. So we have to design, we have to figure out what can we do to correct the fact that we have a 35% food cost. Okay, 35% food cost is not great. So let's go back to our variance for a moment. If it's not always dollar amount, let's say my budget for a 32% food cost, and my actual is 35% food cost. Okay? So actual 35% minus my budgeted of 32% equals 3%. Okay? So I have a 3% over my budget amount. That's probably not a good thing. Okay? And so now I look at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to do something to change this. And so I want to figure out, why is my food cost over by 35, why is it 35%? Well, I don't know. Let's say Hurricane Harvey comes into town and we lose power for a week. We have to throw all that food away. That's going to drive the cost of our food up, right? And not only do we have to throw that food away, but people also aren't coming into our restaurant to eat, because they're at home taking care of their own personal recovery efforts, right? And so we have to be able to look at what's not necessarily happening at the restaurant, but what's happening all over that could potentially affect this 35% food cost. Yes, sir?
I have a question. In the real world scenario, what's the main cause of people going over their food costs?
So there's not like one main cause. It could be something as simple as, so I have friends who own a deli, right? And they have I've talked to them about a couple of different things, and one of the things that they were talking about is their staff not understanding the importance and using the FIFO method, first in, first out. And so they would, well, it's, the manager says, oh, look, they don't realize that something got put, like maybe let's say chicken salad got pushed to the back. And they look and see, oh, we don't have any chicken salad, make this amount of chicken salad. And that person makes it. Well, the chicken salad in the back expires and goes bad. They have to throw it away. They didn't sell it, but they had to pay for those ingredients to make it. Not only do you pay for the ingredients to make it, you also pay someone's labor to make it. So that's not just food costs out the window, it's the labor costs out the window. You might have a situation where somebody doesn't understand the importance of food safety, or maybe they get really distracted and they get pulled off from prepping something, and they get pulled off to go work on the line during a busy lunch rush, and they leave all that chicken sitting out on the counter. And then 3 hours later they come back and that chicken's got to be thrown away because it's been sitting out for 3 hours, right? And so those are some examples. Other examples would be having to remake food. So if I have to remake a steak or have to remake a dish because there's a mistake for it, then I have to throw that away, and then I have to remake it, spend more money on the ingredients, but I'm not getting sales for both of those times. Both times I sell that. Chances are even I'm going to comp that. So I'm not getting any money, and I've made that recipe twice. Okay, so that's gonna
user error then.
Yeah, user error definitely can be a huge cause for the rise in food cost. The other, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Or just like the rise in price of food.
Absolutely, exactly. So, we recently had, what was it in the last year, recall on romaine lettuce. So if I'm selling Caesar salads and romaine lettuce is at a premium price, and I don't adjust the cost of my recipe or my selling price, then that's going to impact my food cost percentage. Okay.
Or if employees are handing out extras, lots of extras, extra this, extra that, not charging for it.
Good, not charging for extra things. So again, we're selling that, or we're serving it, but we're not selling it. We're not bringing in our money.
I have a question.
Yes.
How does it work when breakfast is included, in the hotel? How do they make money from that?
So the breakfast should be included in the room cost. Okay. Now that is something that I've talked to a couple of different select service owners, and that's one of their biggest struggles, is because a select service hotel is kind of known for having lower rates, but then giving away more things like free breakfast or free Wi-Fi or free parking. And
I like
so,
those.
What's that?
I like those.
You like those restaurants? Yeah, hotels. Most people do. I typically look for a place that has complimentary breakfast when I travel. And so, because of that, that really should be included in the rate of the room, a portion of that. So you're at least covering your costs and your expenses.
Now when they break it down, is it hidden in there, or is it in the background with your charge?
So that's a very good question. It would really kind of depend on the hotel. It's not going to be itemized and shown, but it might be involved in the budgeting process. Yeah, that's a very good question. It needs to be, that cost needs to be absorbed somewhere. Okay.
Some hotels will actually ask you to, if you want to, for $7, add breakfast in the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it's a restaurant or a hotel that's going to cost or serve breakfast at a minimal cost or whatnot. Yep. Of course. Good. Questions, comments, concerns. So now we have to take corrective action. We have to figure out what is the reason, and as a manager, that's why as a manager, it's your responsibility to make sure you're staying with your budget, that you're meeting your budget goals. Okay? As a server, do you have to deal with that? No, you don't have to. You got to come in, Make sure you give excellent service to your guests, and then go home. If you're a front desk agent at a hotel, do you have to worry about budget?
Nope.
No, your manager has to deal with that. But you, at the same time, as a manager, it's important that you involve those people and they understand why it is the way we're doing this. Okay, why is it important that we're selling more appetizers instead of more lobster dinners? It's great for the servers to sell a lobster dinner because that's a big tip. That's a lot of money. It's good for the restaurant to serve more appetizers because those are less expensive for us to make, and we're going to make more profit on that. Okay? Whereas the lobster dinner, yeah, it looks great for a server, but for the restaurant, we're not going to get as much profit margin on that. And so we want to start selling beverages. We want to train our servers and our bartenders to suggestively sell. Okay? How many of you notice this when you go to a drive-through at the, I'm going to use Whataburger because that's my favorite, okay? You go through Whataburger. Welcome to Whataburger, this is David. Would you like to try one of our all-time favorites? Well, yeah, I think I might do that, right? That's suggestively selling. Or when a server walks up to the table. Hi, my name's David. I'll be taking care of y'all today. What appetizer would you like to start with? I'm not asking, do you want an appetizer? I'm asking you what appetizer you want. And now you're like, oh, I really do want an appetizer. Or even one more step further, have you tried our crispy zucchini? Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing, right? Our crispy zucchini served with a fresh aioli, which is just garlic mayonnaise. But you say aioli and everyone's like, ooh, that's fancy. Yes, I want to try that, right? It sounds so much more enticing and appetizing. And so teaching our team members how to do that rather than just say, you need to sell more appetizers. And Sally, you only sold 2 appetizers today. The goal is for everyone to sell 5 appetizers. Tomorrow you need to sell 5 appetizers. Well, you're not helping Sally figure out how to sell 5 more appetizers, okay? So you might have, what's that?
But she obviously doesn't know how.
She obviously doesn't know how, right? And so it may be that Sally only had 2 tables. Well, she only had 2 tables because it was a slow period and she sold 2 appetizers. Awesome job, right? So again, all of these things are contingent on the specific environment, the specific situation. So you can't just say, yes, this is good, yes, no, this was not good. And so then we implement coaching. Anybody not know what coaching is? That's okay if you don't. In the regards to working in an environment, in a restaurant, a hotel, and business, what does coaching mean? Who does not know what coaching means? Okay, cool. So coaching is like one-on-one attention. So somebody has gone through training. They've gone through the whole process. They've passed their training because they're working in the restaurant, they're working in the hotel. But now they might need some tweaking or some fine-tuning on specific things. And so we're going to coach them. And that, as a manager, it's your responsibility to identify what can I do to get this employee, this team member, to perform the best that they can. Sally's only selling 2 appetizers. And so I might have a sit down with Sally and say, hey, Sally, I'm going to go sit at a table, and I want you to come to the table, and I want you to try to sell me an appetizer. And she's going to come, I want you to do exactly what you do when you come to the table. And Sally comes over to the table, you're sitting there, and she was like, well, hi, my name is Sally, and would you guys like to try an appetizer today? Is that very convincing? A, there's no eye contact, okay? B, very soft-spoken, not very enthusiastic, okay? And so we might stop and say, okay, how about this time, we try to make eye contact, and why don't you pick your favorite appetizer? Because if you're going to sell something, you want to be passionate about it. And so if you like it, then you should sell it that way. And so you try practicing that role playing a couple of times. When I worked at Cheesecake Factory, now this was actually true, but when I worked at Cheesecake Factory as a server, there's 35, 40 different cheesecakes on the menu, right? As a server, I knew that the faster I get people out of my booth, the faster I get somebody else in there and I can get more money. So if they're going to sit there and they're going to look to this 15-page, or no, actually it's like a 20-page menu, spiral-bound notebook, okay? If they're going to look through that, they're going to figure out what do they want to eat, then it's going to take forever. So I took it upon myself. I said, you know what, my name is David, what are you in the mood for? Pastas are on page 11, sandwiches are on page 12, pizzas are on page 14. That way, they're automatically going directly to that page for something they're interested in eating, rather than them flipping through the menu and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, I have no idea what I'm doing. Yeah, everything does sound good. The cheesecakes. There's 45 different cheesecakes on that menu. So how do you narrow it down? So as a server, I took it upon myself to, well, I had to eat all 45 cheesecakes, so I had to figure out which ones really truly were my favorite. But I had a top 5 list. And so I was prepared with my top 5 is Craig's Crazy Carrot Cake Cheesecake, the Dulce de Leche, the Fresh Banana, Adam's Peanut Butter Cup Fudge Ripple, and my 5th one was the Chocolate Tuxedo Cream. Those were my 5 favorite cheesecakes. And then just to add a little bit of personality to it, I'm telling the people, in order to make my top 5 list, I've had to have them at least 10 times just to make sure that they really are my top 5. And so then people started laughing, and you kind of have that connection with people. And so as a manager, it's your responsibility to help give your team members those tools for them to be successful. And if they're successful, then that will hopefully then also help reach the goals of the organization. Okay, does that make sense? And so that corrective action, corrective action sounds punitive, it sounds negative, it sounds harsh, but it's not always harsh. Okay, but we do want to make sure that we are identifying what the problem is, why is it a problem, and what can we do. Okay, it may be that we have a lot of errors in ringing up the food because we just implemented a brand new POS system. Okay, that we just implemented some new ordering system, and so that's going to increase the number of errors. And so who should we ask for input on trying to alleviate those errors?
People who are actually using it.
The people who are actually using it. Okay, so what is something that is going to talk to them? Hey, Sally, I noticed that you had five errors in your orderings today. What was the reason for those, right? And you don't go up to be like, Sally, why did you have 5 errors today? That professional communication is completely the tone of your voice, how you approach it. If you storm up to Sally, automatic, she's going to be on the defensive. I'm sorry, I keep using Sally, but she's messing up a lot lately, so we need to make sure she's back on track. Okay, but so we got to make sure that when we approach it, it may be in the checkout process. And yet you do it with everybody. Oh, I noticed that you had three errors. You had 2 errors. And so if somebody has a least number of errors, you might say, Sally, what did you do that only caused you to have 2 errors when everybody else is having 5 or 6 errors? And it might be something that Sally has noticed as she's ringing things in, that's kind of something that helps her be more successful. And then you might be able to translate that into everybody else who needs help. So it's something that we can do. I think oftentimes managers think about, I don't think it's necessarily like this conscious thing, but maybe a subconscious thought that they're a manager. They've worked their way up and everybody else is the employees. They're my employees, right? I'm their manager, they're my employees. And we need to make sure that their input is just as valued. Now, does that mean that they get to do whatever they want to do? No, ultimately, you're the manager, you need to make the decision. But it doesn't mean you can't ask for input on that, okay? It's my 10-minute warning. All right. Questions, comments, concerns about budgeting. So we have a couple of different types of budgets. Let me just go into that real quick before we wrap up. Our long-term budget We might have for a year, we might have for maybe like for our what we call our capital expenditures, so things that we want, like big pieces like equipment, or pieces like maybe we want to replace all of the dining room chairs and furniture in our restaurant. Well, that's going to take a lot of budget. That's going to be something we have to plan for. So we call it our capital expenditure. So we're going to make a kind of a bigger purchase. Okay, our long-term budget is going to incorporate all of that. Our operating budget is more short-term. What are we doing right now? So our operating budget was part of our long-term budget. Does that make sense? So operating means what it takes to actually operate right here and now. Our long-term is over the course of the year. So our operating budget, have we talked about quarters, Q1, Q2, Q3? Have we talked about in this class? No, it's my other class. Okay. So in the business world, our budget is broken down by quarters typically. Okay. Q1 means quarter 1. Q2 is quarter 2. Q3 is quarter 3, and Q4 is quarter 4. There's 12 months in a year. Is that true? Okay, good. Okay. So there's 12 months in a year. We divide that by 4 quarters. What is that? Basically 3 months at a time. So we can break our whole year into the different quarters. Okay, does every quarter have the same budget?
No.
No, it doesn't. So we might have a different budget for our busy period that's going to help us, overperform, and we'll have a different budget for our traditional slower period. And where do we find that data? Where do we find that information? In the past. We look at the past, okay? And so our quarters are 3-month increments, okay? And that's kind of what we're looking at our operational budget. Our operational budget can be broken down to the quarter, then down to the month, then to possibly even down to the week, okay? And so we
find it on your income statement?
Yeah, so you can see what your past performance has been on your income statement, yep. And you can look and see what your past performance has been as far as sales, as far as expenses. You can see all of that. ROI is something that I have not mentioned, okay? ROI is return on investment. Now your investment is always money, is not always financial. For you all right now, you guys are students, and so you are investing your time. You've also invested some money, okay, because you paid tuition, you bought your book, but you're primarily investing your time. So what is your hope on your return on your investment? A degree and a better job, okay? So in the business world, if I'm going to make an investment on something, okay, if I'm going to make an investment on, let's say I go from I am a mom and pop restaurant and I do handwritten tickets. And I got to give that to the cook, and then they make the food off of that handwritten ticket, okay? But I want to invest in a electronic ordering system, like a Micros, okay, a POS, point of sales. And so I want to invest in that. Well, it's going to cost me a certain amount of money to put that implement that process, but the return on my investment hopefully will be a decrease in errors, because that way the cooks, if they can't read somebody's handwriting, then they might make a mistake on preparing that food. So a decrease in errors, a decrease in the number of remakes, which means our profit is going to be going up. Our food cost percentage could be decreasing. So that's going to be hopefully my return on my investment. I invest that money, and so before you even invest that money, you should be looking at what is your potential return on investment, and what goal do you want to have. If you want to have that investment paid for in the next, 3 years or 5 years, you want to make sure that you build that into your budget of how we are going to do that. It's just like when you go to, Six Flags, right? You purchase a membership or you purchase a season pass, and then what do they say? Pays for itself with 2 visits. So that's your investment. You're investing money. You've gone 2 times. You've already paid for it. So the same thing happens in business. If I want to purchase a large piece of equipment, if I want to replace all the dining room furniture in my restaurant, then that might lead to people feeling like I have a more elevated space, a nicer restaurant. And so if that means I have a nicer restaurant and I can add $1 to each one of my menu items because people feel like they're getting a better experience, and that could also potentially lead to more profit. So there's all these different things to consider when you're talking about return on investment, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about shrinkage. That's when we trim the meat, as we cook it. You know, if we start with a 12 ounce steak, when I pull it off the grill, is it still 12 ounces? No. Okay, so it's going to shrink. We're going to talk about that edible portion in the next, okay?